again, everybody. How are you?
Ciao, Hong Kong.
I'd just like to give another hand to Kim. And Catherine, of course. I am just so happy and honored to have Maurizio come here and spend some time with us. You know, he is Italian, so he is the godfather of startups and entrepreneurship in Italy. And our good friend and original TEDxHongKongED, you, Dr. Yu, and I visited Maurizio at an Italian version of a startup accelerator, yes? And we instantly knew that we had to, ask Maurizio to come here and share, what they've been up to and for you to see what we saw. Wow. Maurizio, please. Welcome.
Thank you first for inviting me here. And try to, in a few words, to tell what we did. We started this experience, as you can see here in the back. That's H Farm. We started going back to 9 years ago, 2005. And the idea was to create an experiential environment for the next generation of entrepreneurs, helping them to get their ideas turning to real companies, becoming real startups. And to be able to have vision to pursue this one, we have been inspired by the human factor. That's the human factor, which is, you can read here in the slide. It represents our philosophy. It is also expressed in our brand, because we are now in a very deep change, and deep change in terms of paradigm. And we are moving from an age where we have to adapt our behavior to the existing technology, and in somehow we force our natural behavior. And finally now we have technologies getting more smarter, more intelligent. We just saw all day what technology are able to do, that those technology will adapt for the first time to our behavior. So for us to get a philosophy to drive our mission, we thought that technology is supposed to be designed around the human factor. And that's the accelerator represent our philosophy. Then it's extremely important, as you can see, it's the environment. The environment, we created something that people supposed to get a cross-pollination. Try to get from every person some students, because what we did, it's an open platform, a physical open platform that take some inspiration from the agricultural, because the agricultural economy, we've been talking about that.
It's funny that you mentioned that word agriculture. So first of all, this is Hong Kong, right? So real estate's kind of expensive.
Yeah.
I learned that your accelerator is 1,000 hectares large.
Yeah.
It's kind of big for an accelerator, right?
Yeah.
Number two, I was just immediately taken aback by just how organic and natural everything was, where you guys have seen these pictures, right? I mean, if you didn't know there was an accelerator here, it could be a vineyard, it could be, well, I guess Hong Kong people or Asians would think, resort, right?
Yeah.
So you used this very interesting phrase, agricultural API, right? Please tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I like that. I see a metaphor used with agriculture and the digital culture is pretty similar. It's a good momentum now with these technologies to go back to the real basics. The agriculture, in my opinion, and the land, as you mentioned, the dirty land, it was available to anyone, and then you take a piece of land and then you start cultivating your crops, your flowers, whatever you want. It's the same, it's happening with the open source. You can get a platform and then you get and you start doing whatever you want. And that's the other reason why we chosen a place like in the farm, because if you want to have the human being centric, and the best is going back to our basics. This is what now we have to work if you want to leverage such technologies.
Right.
So going back to the farmland, which we were surrounded by over 1,000 hectares, and this is really the perfect environment where you see the people feeling very comfortable, because this is a place which is super. We have labs, we have a number of things that make comfortable all these young entrepreneurs, because we have people coming because they're doing a school, they're doing an entrepreneurship school. We have people who's applying for the accelerator, or other people working in a larger company program that we was there.
That's fantastic.
It's different, but they interact.
So, you know, you mentioned something just now about how, you know, during the, I guess you mentioned, you shared with me before the Industrial Revolution, how dehumanizing, you know, all of that was. And, you know, when Gino and I were visiting your campus, and, you know, it's 15 minutes from beautiful downtown Venice, right? 15 minutes from the airport. You were talking about how, you know, today it's all about relationships and social. And, you know, it just really seemed like, you know, we've been talking a lot about circles today. Centuries ago, right, when Venice was a city-state, right? When it was, you know, you did deals with at the handshake, and you gave credit because of the good name, the good relationships that you had as a farmer, or as a business person, or as a teacher. How do you find Italy, you know, adapting and bringing everything that mattered to you and mattered to Italy and mattered to these great cities before back to today?
Yeah. This is a very interesting point. This is, in my opinion, the most important point today to deal with new technologies in order to jump into the new paradigm. Because I strictly convinced that over the past century, the Industrial Revolution took us a lot of beneficials, a lot of, we built, but we also dehumanized, as you mentioned, because the human is being fitted into processes to scale. Compared with the technology we had at that time, we had to create standards. Those standards, it used to be very designed for massifications, you know, mass market, mass products, everybody working into a transactional mode. So I was doing something for you, you're doing something for someone else, which is different than going back in the centuries where people were just artisan or just a farmer or whatever. It was
everyone was like Caesar,
yes.
Ryan, right?
And it just doing yourself. And now it's the momentum, because this technology is gonna enable, and we need to learn and going back to our basics, because the human is a special matter of creativity and to be spontaneous, to be instinctive. And the industrial era, the industrial age, destroyed this. It just, even from the education, from the school to everything, it was just you be taught to do this, because in your life, that's your career, you do just this little element that is transactional with something else. And the next economy would be relational. Right. And that's gonna completely changing the architecture.
Sure. So, you know, the last time I saw Maurizio, you were co-hosting the Global Accelerator Meeting in Tel Aviv, Israel, and Jerusalem. Yeah. And just as a follow-on from our visit to your, you know, H-Farm and all of your great entrepreneurs in Venice, Tel Aviv, you know, and Jerusalem, and these guys are, you know, phenomenal ecosystems for high-tech venture capital, technology, cutting edge, everything. I learned that you spend a lot of time in Israel, and you spend a lot of time building relationships. And, you know, I thought this juxtaposition was fascinating, right? On one hand, super high-tech, cutting edge, dominant in so many great things, right? But I could sense when we were walking in the old Jerusalem, right, touching the Wailing Wall, yeah, you know, a lot of the things that you were talking about. I mean, and if you could just share with our audience, you know, some of these roots, these common beliefs, you know, and how Italy, you know, another great old, you know, classic civilization, is working so well with our friends in Israel.
Yeah, but this is not just Italy and Israel, but it's like, it could be like Hong Kong or whatever, because I believe that each single place, each single city, each single territory or whatever brings into this hyper-connected world, has to bring something. So the example with Israel is we're dealing with the technology, and Israel is tremendously advanced with the technology, but it's so poor with design and the interface. If you go to Italy, everybody think immediately about design, about the style, about the fashion,
and
these
food.
things. Of course, food. And personally, I'm trying to get the design from Italy, the technology from Israel matching, but this is in any place. It's like what I appreciated because I'm back here since 12 years.
Yes.
So I found the city, I'd be very pleased because I found the city, of course, it's grown up, but I smelled and I felt the same feeling of 12 years ago, because Hong Kong is not just a mega city which is growing from scratch in a couple of years, get millions of people going there. It's a city has its history. And I believe it's like you get here, you eat with chopstick is different than eating into a Chinese restaurant in New York. So that's the purity, you know, that's of each single place. And we have to bring in somehow, and because we have to experience the things physically. That's the reason why we created a physical environment for the experience. I always have an example to learn swimming and to learn biking. It's not any video that I can teach you. It's not, you cannot read. You need to experiment. You need to do. You need to fall down and you need to learn what it means, you know, floating on the water or get balance with a bike. And the same is in everything. I cannot deal with Hong Kong or with Israel or with Italy, whatever, if I not experience the culture.
So you know, I think swimming and biking and all these things are great. If you could share some more, what would you tell our young, you know, our bright, you know, aspiring, talented people here in Hong Kong and in Asia in general, where, you know, again, sometimes we're in these really, really dense urban settings, right, where it's hard to kind of embrace and be in an environment as let's say, cultivating and inspirational as H Farm. What would you recommend?
Yeah, I'm going to recommend to learn every day, to learn from everybody, to learn from everything, and try to learn what your territory is giving you, because it's the first place, it's the first environment you learn and you can provide an answer. I see, especially with the digital technologies, there is a race, there is a challenge to reinvent the next Google, the next Facebook, but only few can succeed in fixing global things from everywhere. Most of things will fix a local, because you know what happens here better than me. I know what happens here. And maybe without thinking, you can fix something global without thinking about that, just because you like to do that. It's the passion, creativity, because the next generation, they have to reinvent the world. Right. We are going toward the sustainability in terms of models. So we need a sustainable economy, sustainable environment, sustainable social, demographic. So the world is changing so much that they have to reinvent. So less barriers. So don't listen too much to old generation like we are, because it's the knowledge that makes the difference, not the experience. Because the experience is what I experienced, and I can tell you this is my version. I'm 50 years old. But the knowledge, so is to be very important for the young generation to learn and to understand the difference between the knowledge and the experience. Because too often, you know, they're victims by the experience of the older people.
Very cool.
Which is
one last question. So, you know, I introduced you as the godfather of the startup community in Italy, but I think a lot of us forget that Marco Polo connected Europe to China, right? Yeah. Columbus connected Europe to the New World, you know? And we're talking about local, we're talking about global, we're talking about the future generations, now we're talking about the past. Where do you see, what sort of exploration, what are the new Columbuses and the new Marco Polos in Italy exploring? What are they looking for?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. What we're looking for, it's looking how to get, you just mentioned, it's the global and the local. This is something that, to me, it's extremely important because we have to get surviving the local experience. We are in a hyper-connected world. So Columbus, in one way, and Marco Polo in another way, they've been connectors. They connected the world with technology they had at that time. So it took years, it took months to just get into a place. Now it's a snap of seconds. It's going to be. And I believe that the local culture, the local knowledge today, it's going to be the must, because everybody from a single place has the chance to connect, but has to bring something. Because we're coming from the standardized culture. We got McDonald's everywhere. And we need to bring something into a global world. So the local is more than just global. So that's what I'm looking for.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Maurizio.
Thank you.
Sounds good.